Hi everyone, I hope you're having a peaceful day. In our last story, a stranger from Lee's past appeared at Sam's gate, stirring fear and doubt in the quiet life she was trying to protect. Now, weeks have passed, the garden has grown, the storms have faded, but something new begins to bloom in secret. While Officer Lee continues his dangerous undercover mission far from home, Sam starts to feel unwell and soon discovers a truth that will change both their lives forever. If you enjoy emotional stories about love, distance, and quiet courage, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for this chapter of Sam and Lee, The Secret Within. Morning comes in a pale hush, as if the sky is trying not to wake the garden too quickly. A thin mist lies over the rows, and the tomatoes hold their dew like small glass beads. Sam lifts the gate latch with the back of her wrist and steps into the soft, damp cold. Her breath shows for a second, then dissolves. Somewhere beyond the bamboo, a hen answers the day with a sleepy cluck. She works on instinct, checking the soil with her fingers, righting a stake that leaned in last night's wind, skimming a leaf that looks too heavy with water. Her body keeps its own rhythm: bend, breathe, tie, stand. But the rhythm falters. A tightness gathers low in her belly, a dull ache that makes her pause and lay a hand on the trellis for balance. It passes, then returns, like a wave that didn't get the message to break only once. Just tired, she tells the morning. She didn't sleep much. Rain tapped the eaves, and it took her a long time to stop listening for footsteps that never came. She kneels, gathers a few weeds, and the ache sharpens. She sits back on her heels until the world steadies, then rises slowly, one palm pressed against her apron. By the time she reaches the water jar, her mouth has gone dry. She cups a drink, swallows, and feels better for a moment. The cut bamboo smells faintly sweet, clean as new linen. She decides to keep moving. Often the body forgives you faster when you pretend nothing is wrong. Footsteps crunch on the path. "Morning, Miss Sam," Mr. Duke calls from the gate, his voice warm, the kind that makes worry step aside. She turns and smiles. "Morning." His eyes take in the pale of her face, the way she leans a little on the trellis. "You all right?" "Just a bit lightheaded?" She hates how small the words sound. "Probably the weather?" "Probably," he says, which is his way of not arguing too soon. He glances at the neat rows, at the steady bones of bamboo holding the green. "Beautiful work." "Thank you." He shifts his weight, as if he might leave and as if he might stay. "If it doesn't pass, there's the clinic in town," he adds, voice careful. "Dr. Land's there this week." She nods, and the movement makes the garden tilt just slightly. "I'll be fine," she says, and hears how thin that sounds too. "All right," he says gently, "but don't wait to be brave." He lifts two fingers in a small salute and goes, the sound of his steps fading into the quiet. Sam stands still for a breath, then two. The ache softens again. A breeze teases the leaves. She resumes her work, slower now, measuring herself against each small task. It's enough, until it isn't. A sudden spin of the world nudges her to the porch. She sits on the step and tucks her hands under her thighs to keep them from shaking. Warmth crawls across the boards. The kettle inside makes a tired click as it cools. It would be easier, she thinks, if the body sent letters. Clear, stamped, signed. Instead, it sends hints and sighs and the strange language of ache. She waits until her pulse stops pounding in her ears. Then she stands, goes inside and rests her forehead against the doorframe. The house smells of tea and sun-dried cotton. Lee's jacket hangs on its peg by the window, its sleeve bowing slightly to the floor, as if reaching to steady something that isn't there. By late morning, the light has sharpened. She washes her hands. The mirror over the basin shows a face she knows too well, and not well enough. Colour gone from the lips, a faint scatter of shadows under the eyes. She picks up her scarf, ties it. The decision comes in a small nod she doesn't announce to anyone. The clinic. The town is close enough to walk, far enough to feel like leaving one world for another. She keeps to the side of the road where the trees lean in. The ache returns, leaves again. A motorbike passes with a polite cough of its horn. A child waves from the back seat, as if everyone belongs to each other for 1 second and then not at all. The clinic sits just beyond the market, where the fish seller calls names into the air, and a hawker arranges oranges into a perfect, hopeful pyramid. Inside, the waiting room is the color of quiet water. A fan circles lazily overhead. Dr. Lan appears in the doorway with the kind of smile that asks you how you are before your mouth catches up. "Sam," she says, "what brings you in?" "Just tired," Sam answers. "Dizzy this morning? Some cramps?" "How long?" Lan asks, gently practical. "A few days, maybe longer." Admitting it makes it real. Real things always move closer when you name them. Lan doesn't rush. She asks small questions with soft endings and listens with her eyes as much as her ears. She takes Sam's pulse, the inside of her wrist warm against Lan's fingers. She checks the calm rise and fall beneath Sam's scarf. She speaks in simple words about common causes, about rest, about the body's ways of saying slow down. Then she pauses thinking, and the pause opens a door Sam didn't know was in the room. "When was your last?" Lan begins, and finishes the sentence with a tilt of her head that makes the question gentle, private. Sam answers, and when she hears the answer she's given, something inside her goes very still. "Let's run a quick test," Lan says, almost casually, the way you suggest tea on a cold day. Time becomes a hallway with no windows. The clock makes a polite sound once, then again. Sam sits with her hands folded, then unfolded, folds them again. She thinks of the path between the tomatoes, of the way new leaves unfurl when no one is looking. She thinks of Lee walking somewhere under a different sky, of the careful way he ties rope, not tight enough to bruise, not loose enough to fail. The door opens. Lan's face is the same and not the same, as if good news and caution arrived together and agreed to share the same expression. "Congratulations," she says softly. "You're pregnant." The word lands and then keeps landing. It touches floor, walls, the inside of Sam's chest. It's lighter than she imagined and heavier. She doesn't speak. Her mouth opens, then closes, then remembers how to breathe. How far? The question escapes in a whisper that sounds like someone else. About 6 or 7 weeks. Lan's smile is steady, a light that doesn't blink. She watches Sam's eyes, ready to meet joy or fear or both. "We'll take good care of you." Sam nods and the motion shakes a tear loose. It surprises her, the way rain sometimes starts before you decide to let it. She laughs, a small broken sound that isn't broken at all, and wipes the tear with the heel of her hand. Lan talks about simple things: food, rest, the way to carry a day more gently. She writes notes on a card, folding advice into corners Sam can unfold later. She mentions appointments, a date penciled lightly on a calendar she holds in her head. When she finishes, she touches Sam's forearm once, the gesture a bridge between the chair and the door. "You're not alone," she says, and means it in the practical way and the other way. Outside, afternoon has edged forward, the light, finer, more precious. Market voices have softened to a hum. Sam walks with the card in her pocket, fingers resting against it as if it were a small, warm animal. The ache in her belly has changed its shape, still there, but quieter, meaningful. She stops under a tamarind tree where the path bends toward home and presses a palm low against her apron. "Hello," she whispers to the air that is now, somehow, more than air. The road answers with the sound of a bicycle bell. A boy passes and grins and keeps going. Sam finds herself smiling back, then turning serious again, as if a smile were a thing to spend carefully. When the house appears, she feels the garden tug her the way it always does, as if the soil knows how to call by name. She goes to the trellis first. The bamboo hums when the breeze moves through it. She places her hand on a smooth knot and closes her eyes. The body that carried fear all morning is carrying something else now. Something that makes the edges of the world softer and the middle of it bright. Inside, the jacket still hangs on its peg. She steps close and touches the sleeve with 2 fingers. Her throat tightens. Joy climbs up alongside worry, arm in arm, refusing to let the other speak first. She doesn't know how Lee will hear the news, or when, or where he'll be standing when the words find him. She only knows the words are real now and they have weight, and they will not wait forever. At the table, she sits with a blank page and a pen, but she doesn't write yet. The kettle resumes its small, familiar song. Light reaches across the floor and rests at her feet. She lays a hand on her belly and listens, not for sound, but for the kind of silence that carries meaning. "Lee," she breathes, the name a bridge she can stand on without falling. "Come back safe." Outside, the afternoon turns toward evening, the way it always does. The garden keeps its slow promises. Somewhere far away, under whatever light he has, a man ties one more knot and hopes it holds. The morning after the clinic visit unfolded soft and grey. Clouds drifted low over the hills, and the light came slow, as if the world itself didn't want to startle her. Sam stepped outside barefoot, her feet sinking slightly into the cool soil. The garden breathed around her. The faint hiss of wind through bamboo, the quiet drip of dew falling from the leaves. She moved slowly, not from weakness, but from awareness. Every step, every motion seemed to echo with new meaning. She watered the seedlings with care, her hand steady on the spout. When she stopped to rest, she caught herself touching her belly again, almost without thinking. The gentle, protective instinct that came before words. The hens clucked softly, pecking near her feet. She smiled. "It's all right," she whispered to them, though maybe she was speaking to herself. The ache in her back reminded her she should take breaks more often. She found a stool near the trellis and sat down, looking over what she and Lee had built together. The straight lines of bamboo, the ropes tied with the kind of precision he'd once shown her. The tomatoes were heavy now, their color deepening from green to gold. She imagined Lee's quiet pride if he could see this, the garden still thriving, the home still breathing. But under the calm, her thoughts tangled. She wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he'd eaten, if he could feel the same weight she now carried inside her. How would he react when he learned? Would his eyes light up with joy or darken with worry about the danger he still faced? Sam leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I wish I could tell you myself," she murmured. "Not in a letter, not in silence." A soft wind stirred the trellis. The bamboo swayed, the ropes creaked faintly, like a heartbeat answering her. She looked at the rows she'd planted, the quiet order of them. They reminded her that life didn't need permission to continue, it simply did. Seeds sprouted even when storms came. Flowers bloomed even when no one was there to see. So she began to work again, lightly this time, trimming dry leaves, gathering a few tomatoes into her basket. The red against her palm looked like tiny suns. She placed them gently into the woven straw, their warmth seeping through her skin. In the afternoon, she made soup. The smell of lemongrass and ginger filled the kitchen, simple and grounding. As the broth simmered, she opened the window wider to let the breeze in. It carried the smell of wet earth and the sound of distant laughter. Someone's child playing by the road. Her chest ached, but softly this time, a tender ache that came with imagining. She pictured a small pair of hands in the garden, a voice calling her name, the rhythm of two sets of footsteps where there used to be one. When evening arrived, she brought a chair out to the porch. The sun had fallen low, a thin band of orange touching the tops of the hills. She sat quietly, watching the last light scatter across the bamboo. The trellis gleamed faintly, each pole catching the glow before dusk claimed it. Sam's hand found her stomach again. "You'll meet him one day," she said softly. "He's brave, and he'll come home to us." A bird crossed the fading sky, its wings slicing through the quiet. For a long moment, she followed its path until it disappeared into the horizon, where she imagined Lee might be walking under the same dim light. The garden settled into stillness. The air cooled, and the scent of soil deepened. Sam rose, closed the gate, and turned toward the house. Inside, the kettle began to hum. The same sound it made every evening, steady and faithful. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Tomorrow we keep growing." Some beginnings arrive quietly, disguised as small aches or gentle mornings. But even in silence, life finds a way to speak, reminding us that love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It simply grows where the heart makes room.